Hello everyone, my name is Gabe Gurwin. I'm joined today by Dean Thompson. This is GamingAngelGabriel, and you're watching What We Saw. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the show, you haven't seen it before, basically this is like an aggregate. We take different news sources from all across the internet dealing with gaming, we give you our opinions on them, mostly how it relates to the industry besides just straight up bias. But the show has three main segments. The first is a news segment where we go over all of the news stories from the week. The second segment is a feature, and this changes from week to week. And then the third is a mix of games we're currently playing and what we're looking forward to in, the next week or two. So, we're going to jump right in. Now, if you watched the show last week, we mentioned Nihilistic Software. We were talking about Call of Duty on the PS Vita. It's Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified. Just kind of by chance, a new story just came in that Nihilistic is actually going to be leaving the box game retail business, presumably after the release of Black Ops Declassified, which is coming out. I mistakenly said it was being pushed back, but I believe it's actually still coming out in November. So basically, here's a kind of interesting quote from the developers of that game about what they're doing. So they're going to change their name to Instigate, kind of like, what's that, Inscape, that company that makes, like, I think they actually made some of the Bond games on the DS. But basically, here's the quote from their new website. There's no bigger cliche in the video game industry right now than to say that a studio is reorganizing itself away from retail game development and towards the new challenges of downloadable and mobile games. Everyone knows retail sales are down, publishers are hurting, independent developers are suffering, blah blah blah. With this in mind, Nihilistic is announcing today that, OMG, we are reorganizing our company after 14 years of working with retail box game development and reforming as Instigate Games, a new company focused on downloadable, online, and mobile games. Okay,
Another nebulous name.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of their last name. I thought it was kind of
Well, when your
pointless.
name basically says you believe in nothing, you can't be too shocked when it goes down the toilet.
And the very mediocre kind of reviews kind of point towards nothing, I guess. But
Exactly.
usually I'd be a little more upset by this, I guess, when a company does something like this. When Crytek announced that they plan eventually, I don't know when, to go completely towards a free-to-play system. Now, a lot of people call free-to-play pay-to-win, and for that reason, I'm kind of on the same board. I don't like downloading a game, realizing I'm totally gimped, and then having to, pay $5 here, $10 there to keep up with it. I like paying my $60 and then having the game. But with Crytek, that's a company that made, an incredible series with Crysis. I absolutely love Crysis 2. Crysis 3, I'm sure, is going to be great, and I wondered how much longer they're going to keep doing it. But with Nihilistic, like we were talking about, they're not really a prestigious company, to say the least. Activision held off on releasing the information that they were going to be developing that game, I think in part because they realized people, frankly, just don't really like Nihilistic. They've made about, 4 or 5 noteworthy projects, and they're all noteworthy for being very, very average, some even below. So, I don't think any drinks are going to be poured out for Nihilistic saying this.
I wouldn't think so, no.
At the same time, it's, maybe this will finally be their niche. Maybe they can make some iOS games or something like that can actually get popular. I know some companies have made a business out of making good mobile games, but I really don't know what to think. And that's not to say that they've been, having it easy, because they got, a very, very poor-selling system with the Vita to release Resistance, and then they also had the Move, where they had to release PlayStation Move Heroes, I think it was called, which, of course, not a well-received platform, so... but that's basically all there is to say about that. We don't really know what else is coming, except apparently they're still around. Alright, now, the second story of the day, and this one excites me a little bit more. I know some people were kind of upset about it. I was a little more optimistic. 2 developers from Bioshock Infinite are leaving the studio to go apparently work for Microsoft, according to their LinkedIn resumes. This is the first on Kotaku. The link you guys are going to see in the description is from IGN reporting on this. But one of the guys that left was the combat design director. His name was Clint Bundrick, and the other one was Don Norbury, who is head of the artificial intelligence. Now, there's been some reporting I saw on Kotaku, actually, that the reason for this may have been because they were having trouble with the AI Elizabeth that you see throughout the game. You see in the trailers and stuff like
Yes.
that. But the fact that they're going to Microsoft has me a little bit excited, I guess. I was just talking about how they need new studios or new games. I don't think they'd take two people working on such a hardcore AAA title to go put them on either a Kinect title or working on a future, release out of an already established franchise. I'm guessing this is something next gen. Microsoft tends to have at least a couple new IPs come out each generation, and then they kind of start churning out sequels for them over the course of that. You saw it with Halo and Forza to an extent last generation. Now you're seeing it with Gears of War and a lot of these Kinect games. But I know a lot of people aren't as happy about this. I can sympathize, I guess, because Bioshock Infinite has been kind of troubled development-wise. It was initially supposed to be released at the end of this year in fall, and it got pushed back now to February, which is February recently, just because of all the AAA games, has been a pretty popular month. I think Dead Space 3 is coming out then. I think there's a few more big titles coming out then. But
Aliens Colonial Marines comes out February 12th.
Yeah, by Gearbox, a very big developer. So it's not like that unfortunate, I guess, that the title's coming out then, but I know people are kind of worrying about it after being named kind of a unanimous Game of the Year at E3 2011, which boasted titles like Skyrim. It was completely missing in action at E3 2012. And I still think the title's gonna be solid, but it has to kind of worry people, I guess. There's been a lot of shuffling actually around there. We mentioned actually last week how Gears of War's director of production, Rod Ferguson, and this is also coming from that website, left Epic Games with Cliff Bleszinski, but he actually is now on the Irrational team. So very, very strange. Not much we know about it. This could just be that the internet is now very much on top of this kind of thing, and that this might not actually be that out of the ordinary. But we're just gonna have to wait and see. A lot of these breaking stories, that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. I would really like to see Xbox come out with a few more exclusives. Sony's got some fantastic ones, and of course, I'm really excited about the Last of Us, especially. Right. I've watched virtually everything on it, read everything on it, so I'm quite excited. It just would really be nice if they can come up with something other than Forza and Halo and Gears.
Right.
So
it
could be something in the mix. Who knows?
And it seems like they, especially with Rare, there's kind of a missed opportunity there. Rare has definitely not been their old self after releasing titles for a lot with Nintendo, actually. Star Fox Adventures, a lot of people kind of shudder because they think of that as the beginning of the end. But Star Fox Adventures, that game is awesome. I don't care what people say. I love it. I played it. I love the story. It was funny. I liked, it was kind of Zelda-like, but it was great. And Rare has also, developed games, Killer Instinct. That was like my first violent game back in the day on the Super Nintendo. Yeah. And of course, Goldeneye, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So it seems like they kind of have, the resources, maybe not quite as much as Sony, but I think they can do it. As far as you said, The Last of Us, I held out on getting a PS3 when the console was first launched for two reasons. One was, the price was just ridiculous, $600 compared to what I believe was a $400 and a $300 price point for Microsoft's system for the new 360. And the second reason, and this is the one that really kind of held water for the first couple years, was there were no games on the PlayStation 3.
Yes. It
was launched with Resistance, and it was launched with MotorStorm actually came a few months later, I believe. But for a while, that was pretty much it. Now that's no longer the case. After Naughty Dog came out with the Uncharted series, and we have more Resistance titles, God of War completely took over, Little Big Planet, Heavy Rain, and of course...
Starhawk.
And Beyond Two Souls, which is coming out at some point. So the tables have kind of turned. That being said, Microsoft isn't, down and out. Obviously, they are still selling extremely well. I think they just passed either 70 or 80, I want to say 70 million units
Oh, it's
sold.
Insane. I know. It's incredulous when you think of how many units they've actually sold this last couple of years.
Especially considering the fact that they are still well behind Nintendo's Wii, which has become obsolete, completely obsolete. So, you know, hopefully we see some more stuff. I'd like to see them move towards more games. I saw just, I think yesterday, they retired the Twitter and Facebook apps on the 360, which...
I saw that, too. I saw a little segment last night, in fact, on that.
Which I thought was interesting. Not sure why that was. I don't think...
Apparently, if you had the apps originally, that you'll still be able to use them.
It's just like a no further people can...
what was that? I'm sorry?
Just like no further people can use them, that sort of thing?
Yeah, if you had them when the apps are originally out, you're still able to function and use them, but they'll be no longer like tonight. If I want to go on and try to download the app for Facebook, it's not going to happen. So I think they have something up their sleeve on the next 720 or whatever the next gen deal is. But for right now, it's kind of that's pretty much the end of it. So if you got in early and you had the app, then I think you're still able to function on it.
That's interesting. We're going to see what this is. You know, Microsoft's definitely pushing this, this is your entertainment center kind of thing. We're going to see how well that works out for them. Obviously, the system's still selling extremely well, but the PlayStation 3 has made a resurgence based almost entirely on hardcore AAA titles that gamers want to play. It's a little too late in the console cycle for me to consider actually getting a PS3, considering I think the PS4 is going to be coming out soon. But The Last of Us... It looks so much fun. It looks so good.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm extremely excited. I like the survival horror. I'm kind of zombied out as much as I like.
So am I.
On the Left 4 Dead 2, and I was really enthralled for the most part with Dead Island, although it was just filled with game bugs and all kinds of weird glitches. But I would really like to see something that's a little bit more story driven, that really makes you think. And this looks like it. And if it has the DNA of a game like Uncharted, then it's going to be awesome for sure.
It does.
It's going to be a real winner for PS3.
It really does look great. I think some people were kind of weirded out by how raw it kind of was. But yeah, like you said, it looks like they're taking a different approach. We haven't seen any gameplay yet where you actually see a zombie in game. They've been showing fighting against survivors. I kind of like the road kind of style they've been going with.
Yes.
But you're right, zombies have become the new kind of modern warfare cliche.
Oh, God, they got a new sleeping dog thing I saw, where, again, almost like the, I guess, Red Dead Redemption, where they're going to bring in zombies into the karate streets of
But it's like so many different titles.
I'm not interested. It's a cheesy idea. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that'll probably jump on it.
Around Halloween,
it's too much with the zombies.
I think around Halloween, that's where you can kind of get away with it. People like zombies for a little while, but you're right. Robert Boeing, who left Infinity Ward a few months ago, he founded a studio called Robotoki, and he announces his first game, zombies. There was a company, I don't know, it may have been Suda51, but I don't think, maybe it might have actually been the producer from Mega Man, who's working on Mega Man Legends 3. He announced he's going to be releasing a zombie game. Microsoft, we were looking for some AAA titles. They showed this big XBLA title, State of Decay, zombie game. So,
yep, I saw it.
It seems like
of course you have a new zombie game that's on the Wii U, which actually that's the only one that would interest me in possibly getting that console. It just seemed kind of interesting. I watched it. They had a fairly lengthy demo on a guy that had a little handheld item that kind of correlates with what's going on the screen, and it was an innovative and interesting concept. So I'm a little bit intrigued on that, but I have to see more of it. Yeah,
and as far as story goes, it looks pretty standard. I think it's set in London, but that is what I'm looking at for when I get a Wii U. I'm waiting to see the pre-orders on the deluxe edition sold out, but I think I'm on like a waiting list to get on the deluxe one. Otherwise, I'd be getting the basic one, which it's kind of cut down. But anyway, and that game, Zombie U, is actually made by Ubisoft Montpellier, the same company that...
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's the same company that has been working on Rayman for a while. So, very interesting. But zombies kind of are going the route of modern games. I think pretty soon franchises are going to have to start kind of moving away. And unlike a game like Call of Duty, where... with the modern warfare thing kind of straining on people, they take it into the future. You can't make a series like Resident Evil not zombies infected.
I agree.
It's a little more limited.
I think The Last of Us, there's some kind of a plague or something.
It's like a fungus.
Some kind of a bacteria or fungus. So at least it's a little bit more original. It's more like they're infected and not like a bona fide zombie.
Right, and it looks like it's going, like I said, down kind of the road path where it's very barren. And
it takes place in Pittsburgh, of all
places. Yeah, at least part of it does. All the demos they've been showing have been from it. Of course, Pittsburgh's kind of the zombie capital of the world. A lot of zombie movies filmed here. By the way, if you haven't been to Pittsburgh, look at a picture of it now. It's very pretty. I just want to get that out there.
I was there in 81 was the last time I was there. Actually, I was into model railroading, and I studied a lot of the bridges and the train systems in Pittsburgh 1,000 years ago. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah.
But I've been there probably 5 times. It's an awesome place. I've been anxious to go, and I'll probably be coming there soon, probably inside the next year. I'd like to go back east and take my wife. She's never been back there. So Pittsburgh and New York are hot on my list.
Yep. So our next story of the day, and this relates to the Wii U that we were just talking about, Pikmin 3, the big AAA title, besides, of course, the kind of obligatory Mario game that is coming to the Wii U, will no longer be a launch title. They've said now that it is going to be released in spring of 2013. Now, part of me wants to say, oh, this is just Nintendo once again having problems, and there's very, very little about this, by the way. Iwata just said that the game's now coming out for spring 2013. But another part of me wants to say, with this cavalcade of releases that we have every fall season, a game like Pikmin 3, which of course is a heavy hitter, big budget title that Nintendo has, may actually do better in spring. Now, I want to say late spring, as opposed to early spring, only because there are a ton of titles coming out in that February, March, April period next year. And of course, there could be more in May, but I think late April, early May probably is going to be the direction for that game. I was underwhelmed when I saw it at E3. I don't know if you saw any footage of it. It was very, very samey, I guess.
Yeah, it's about the same. I pretty much concur with you. That was, I guess, my impression of it too. It just seemed a little cartoony. And
it was, very, very similar to Pikmin 1 and 2, which are good, but Nintendo's kind of going down that track of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Sure.
And if it ain't broke, you don't fix it, but you also don't need to release it again, because people can play the first one.
Good point, yeah.
They introduced the Rock Pikmin, and when they showed that off at E3, I was excited. I was like, oh, it's kind of like, Pokemon. They could have a ton of these. And then that was the only one they showed. It was like, oh, there's rocks? Can't you ice, no fire, just rocks? Okay. In its defense, it does look to be a pretty good tech demo for the Wii U, which I guess would have helped more if it was releasing with the Wii U, but... Yes. The water effects, my jaw dropped when I saw them. The water looks very, very good. The environments look very solid. And apparently the Wii U, although its CPU may be a little bit weaker than the current systems, which I think is kind of sad, the GPU is a little bit better. And with the colors and the very, very high-res textures that I'm seeing, even in a game like this, which is cartoony, it looks good. So maybe it's not a bad decision by Nintendo to shuffle it off, and maybe they're looking to add more stuff. I know a lot of people were kind of disappointed with the fact that the game is supposed to be played with a Wiimote and a nunchuck, even though it can be played with a gamepad. And when a game's coming out with the release of your system and the big thing you're pushing is the gamepad, maybe for the game to do that, it might not be such a bad thing to not release it with the actual system.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
So our next one is one that I've kind of had to avoid looking at, and that's Halo 4, apparently in full, has been leaked onto the internet. There's gameplay videos of it that have been released onto YouTube, people showing the endings, people talking about the endings. And Microsoft announced that they would be banning consoles, not just Xbox Live accounts, but consoles, infinitely if you had played the game prior to its release. I figure if, a studio, or if a store releases the game a day or two in advance, they're probably not going to do that, but... people pointed out, too, that this isn't just a one-time thing. A lot of the Halo games have been leaked a while before they came out, almost as if Microsoft may have been doing it on purpose. I'm not saying they did, so... But I find that very interesting. At the same time, I'm worried because I just kind of, almost by accident, I saw some info about the story. It didn't say too much that, is really a shocker, but... Halo definitely benefits from kind of this mystery tone, especially the early games, and this upcoming one looks like it's going back to that. So I advise you people, try to go into Halo 4 with as little information about the game as possible, besides, recapping yourself on Halo 3.
Yeah, I
possibly
purposely
in early
haven't
games.
watched any kind of videos on it. I've seen a couple previews that were, I guess, mainstream previews. But yeah, I saw that. It kind of reminded me of the spy shots, or someone leaked the Xbox 720 screenshots. It has a kind of a feel to it, you know.
That little dev kit thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is so, like, any moron with Photoshop and Illustrator could do that, so we don't know if it's true or not. But
it makes you wonder. So yeah, I almost wonder if Microsoft is spying that too.
But since he's holding up the postcard, it means it's real. It's
Right.
kind of like a couple months ago, Obama held like an AMA on Reddit, and to prove that it was really him, he took a photograph of him sitting at a laptop and put it up there.
Oh, jeez.
like someone couldn't take that picture and put it up there and be lying. But I don't think that this is completely an accident. I'm gonna put it out there. I think maybe Microsoft had something to do with this. It generates buzz, and like people say, any publicity is good publicity. So
Yeah.
trying to, with this market, Halo used to dominate every time the game's released, and with Call of Duty now coming out, it kind of saps away a little bit of the sales, especially considering that Call of Duty's released always a week after Halo. So saying something like this, anything to get people's attention, I guess, is good. So
I wouldn't put it past them. Yeah, it's a distinctive possibility.
And I am very, very excited. Halo 4 looks great. Frank O'Connor is still at the helm of it. He was one of my favorite game developers. And if you don't believe me, go watch CGI Undertow's review of The Sims busting out for the Game Boy Advance. I mentioned him by name. That was like a year ago. So, all right. And now moving actually back to the Wii U. Talk about Scribblenauts Unlimited. Now, this is a title, it was very popular on the DS, I believe, back in the day, and they made Scribblenauts and then Super Scribblenauts. And these were two titles. Basically, they're kind of like platformer adventure games, but basically, whenever you come across an obstacle or something that needs to be done, you type in the name of whatever object you need, and then you get that object. And for Scribblenauts Unlimited on the Wii U, you're actually going to be able to get Nintendo characters to come out. So I'm looking at a picture of it right now. It looks like some of the ones that you'll be able to get, and this is only on the Wii U version of the game. I'll go into why a little bit more later, but some of the characters you're going to be able to guess. Princess Zelda, it looks like. Link, Epona, a Goron, it looks like. I'm not sure if it's just a generic one. Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Yoshi. And apparently you won't be able to use adjectives with these, though, so you don't have, like, smelly Yoshi or something, like you will with other objects. This title will also be available on the PC and the 3DS, but it is only going to have the Nintendo characters on the Wii U version. They said the reason for this, I can't find actually where I originally found this, but they said because the game is actually done, and on the 3DS, the cartridges are already manufactured. So that was their reasoning. Now, a few years ago, this would have held water because, the game's out. But now, not so much. There's, day one updates you can do now to get that stuff out there. So, kind of makes me wonder. It wouldn't have been too hard, I'd think, to kind of port these things onto the 3DS after the fact and release it at launch. A couple other, companies do that. Companies do that all the time. Even if you buy a game just playing for the single player, if you don't have online today, you're kind of SOL, because sometimes big bugs, can be fixed with day one updates. Yep. Nintendo seems to be a little bit better about that, with the exception of the Skyward Sword progress block that there was. There really haven't been that many bugs with Nintendo games, so even something, that's just being released as an exclusive, or at least a console exclusive, so I don't expect this to be that groundbreaking. I think it's kind of going to be a selling point for people to go out and buy it. It's going to be on commercials, but I don't expect it to affect gameplay. We're actually going to be coming back to Scribblenauts in our last segment, so stay tuned for that. And in the last news story of the day, here's another Wii U thing. We're really focusing on this today, and this is Foxconn, a huge electronics manufacturer who also make Xbox 360s, iPhones, all things like that, admitted to hiring illegal underage workers.
Oh, jeez.
Now, this is in China where, the manufacturing process can be quite shady. Just a few months ago, there was actually an Xbox 360 plant run by Foxconn. Workers staged a protests threatening a mass suicide if they were not allowed to stay in their current plant. I guess what was happening was that plant was closing, and they were allowed to leave and go to a different plant. And Foxconn kind of, they didn't give in, but eventually the workers, I guess, just agreed to step down and leave. But
I guess they weren't dying to leave bad enough.
Man, that was bad.
No, I'm sorry.
So
that was pretty bad.
But yeah, this is kind of it's troubling. You know, obviously this is a place that Nintendo has a contract with to develop their or manufacture their systems, but you need to be aware of what they're doing.
They pay these people a couple bucks a day. I mean, I have a whole bastion of these expensive die-cast cards that cost me $165 each, but I'm sure that from what I've heard that they pay the people between $2 and $4 a day, and they lovingly build and art, and paint these things and assemble and put them together. If you bought one here in the United States, it probably would cost you $700.
It is.
So it's an unfortunate trend. People tend to want to look away. They don't want to know that, but that's the reality of a lot of things that are done over in China, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And Foxconn said basically that this is what they call a student intern program. I call that bullshit completely.
Yes,
they say
pretty much.
It says here, this is from The Escapist, that 2.7% of its workforce was made up by this quote-unquote student internship program. So Nintendo, they're seen as kind of a happy, very cheerful company, and they are, and I believe they do have good intentions, but this isn't the first time kind of either a human rights or a manufacturing issue has come into question. There's an environmental agency that basically gives a percentage rank to companies, mostly electronics companies, about their impacts with conflict minerals. And these are minerals, if you're going to be playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2, pay attention to what I'm saying, because this is actually going to be an issue in that game. But basically, these are minerals found in a very small region, very small geographically percentage of the world. And Nintendo scored a 0% on trying to avoid these minerals with their products. They were the only manufacturer to get a 0%.
Wow.
Of course, it shows negligence on their part, but at the same time, I think they really need to look into this and release a statement on their own, because even though this is Foxconn, not Nintendo or Microsoft or Apple directly, they're making their products. These are products that these people are making that have their names on them.
Yes.
And it's not to say that this is going to, be a very big stain on Nintendo or any other company. In fact, it really hasn't gotten that much attention at all. And this is actually, Foxconn admitted to this. Obviously, they used the name student interns to kind of soften it a little bit, but I'm guessing this isn't the only manufacturer to do this, and there are probably other things Foxconn isn't telling us about their manufacturing process.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
All right, now that is the news for today. We're going to be moving on to our second segment. Give you a little warning here, this might get heated.
Let's hope not. Had a long day, I'll tell you.
Now, basically, this started off earlier in the week. I think it was it last Tuesday?
Yes,
the game came out? 007 Legends was released.
On the 16th, yeah.
Now, currently, I mentioned Metacritic a lot. I think that's going to become a running joke, but I love the website. It's one of the only things Adam Sessler and I don't agree on. I really like Metacritic. But reviews started coming in for 007 Legends. Right now, at 13 reviews, the Metascore is a 48 out of 100. Now, Dean and I have very different opinions on this. He bought the game. Did you buy it day one or pretty soon after?
Oh yeah, no, I had the pre-order paid off 2 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. I played Goldeneye and really enjoyed it. And this is pretty much almost an extension of that, but augmented with a lot more details. They put a lot more elements into the gameplay, but it looks almost like an extension, almost like a DLC or like a continuation or a sequel. So I was very excited. Again, I was born the same year that the very first James Bond movie came out, so I've been a big fan. My dad took me to see them in the late 60s. I saw every Roger Moore film, and from pretty much
my dad
pretty
hates
much from
Roger
then
Moore.
on. So
my dad hates Roger Moore. I'm not.
I actually like the SOB. He's kind of an arrogant, dude. But what are you going to do?
They make fun of him on Family Guy all the time. I know. But basically, why this is our feature of the week is it started out, I posted something on Dean's Facebook. I saw IGN had given the game a scathing review.
And that was really the only review, and I think that's why the Metacritic score was exactly what the IGN review was early on.
Early on, for sure. But I'm going to release some, or say some quotes from this. I know Dean had, I'm sure he has a rebuttal for pretty much all of these. But basically, the title started off, shocking, positively shocking for this review. So we're going to go, this is something that I never, ever like a reviewer doing, even when it's made by the same manufacturer, and that's, he said, and I quote, "The fact that it is so shamelessly copies from the Call of Duty playbook would be almost forgivable if it actually did a good job of it, but 007 Legends is just so painfully dull. None of its set pieces are at all memorable, and each mission is more or less structured in the exact same way, with Bond machine gunning everyone to death on his way into a villain's base, before taking some photos and scanning fingerprints in their office, and then machine gunning everyone to death on his way out again. It's not gung-ho, it's ho-hum," end quote. Now, that kind of structure that they just mentioned, if you ever seen the show Test Chamber on Game Informer, they actually mentioned that Goldeneye, the original Goldeneye, released in '97 on the N64, actually was a little bit similar to this, in the fact that the game, it's considered a classic, one of the best shooters of all time, one of the best N64 games of all time, but if you go back and play it, it doesn't really feel like a Bond experience because there's not really much stealth. It's basically a shooter.
It's a shooter, exactly. And, I mean, they all are. In fact, the GoldenEye Reloaded is, and everything now is pretty much going to be compared to a Call of Duty. In the old days, it probably would have been a Medal of Honor or a Wolfenstein. In fact, I talked to Mark Bussler, Classic Game Room, a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he's actually playing the game that I donated, which was Wolfenstein Return to Castle. He goes, "God, it reminds me of almost like a old school, I guess, Medal of Honor game." And I said exactly. I mean, so a lot of these games are pretty much derivative. But to pick that apart and say that every level is the same, that's what you do in pretty much all the games now. You go in shooting, there's a couple little side quests or perhaps a couple submissions that you have to do to advance in the level. But for the most part, I mean, I just think that the guy had no love for the game, was completely picking it apart. You can tell if you listen to it a couple of times, you can see that right off the bat, he had it out for the game. He never mentioned any of the positive elements on the game itself. Some of his comparisons, and then even bringing up the frame rate drop, which is totally untrue. No, I've seen several reviews where they said they were looking for that, and it's not even the case.
I feel like part of that...
Very smooth, by the way. It's very precise, very smooth. In fact, it's even tweaked over GoldenEye Reloaded, which IGN gave it an 8.5. That'd be like giving Call of Duty 4 a 10, which I think it actually got a 10 at one time.
From a lot of places.
And then all of a sudden now the same reviewer gives it, or the same company gives it a 5 on Modern Warfare 2. It's completely unwarranted. I just don't see it.
I will point out, actually, the game runs on the same engine as Call of Duty. It's made by Eurogamer, who made actually the last James Bond game, like you mentioned. But I'm going to point out something else. I think part of it is, obviously, he's not writing the review as he's playing. They write the review after the fact, so starting off with that big blow may be the reason for that. But he also pointed out his problems with stealth. And I'm going to go on to more reviews, too, because I know just one isn't enough. But if you choose, I quote, "If you choose to play it in a stealthier manner, then you're in for an even worse time. For a game that seems hell-bent on giving a modern makeover to some of Bond's former exploits, it comes as quite a shock, that its stealth mechanics are so archaic. Bond moves silently when crouched so you can sneak up behind enemies and knock them out or shoot them with a silenced weapon. However, the fact that you can't move bodies or peek around corners, coupled with the near-useless line-of-sight indicators for guards, means you rarely stay hidden for long, and once your cover is blown, then you're rushed by every enemy in the vicinity, and the firefights resume."
That's pretty much correct. I mean, actually, to be honest with you, if you take your time, the stealth works to a point, but if the game is designed at a certain point where stealth is out the window. Now, there are a couple levels. I'm actually a third of the way into the final chapter, into the Moonraker section. I just couldn't play anymore. I was so tired last night. I wanted to save the final end of it when I'm completely refreshed. But the stealth mechanics, I think, work great. In fact, it's a huge improvement, and they've implemented a lot of new gadgets and things to help you with the stealth. which they didn't have in GoldenEye Reloaded. So everyone raved and gave. GameSpot gave GoldenEye Reloaded an 8. IGN, ironically, gave it an 8.5. It got glowing reviews, probably because it's riding on the coattails of the famous GoldenEye for the N64. And I know the Wii version also had done very, very well. So the game works fine. The stealth, I think, is awesome in it. But what happens is that you'll kill 4 or 5 enemies quietly. I was a little troubled you couldn't move the bodies. I do like to drag the bodies and put them in a shadow or whatever. So that is one con on the game that, as a stealth lover, I thought that was a little odd. But it works good. You just wait for them to kind of walk through a pattern behind some crates. Then you shoot them with a silenced weapon, or you come up and you can do a chokehold on them. And you advance. You have it. Now you get gadgets. You get a wristwatch with a laser beam. You see the cameras way across, 150 feet across the room. You can aim a laser at the camera, and it basically burns it out. Now you can move in quietly. I actually think it's a huge improvement over GoldenEye Reloaded. So he's partially true. Once the cat's out of the bag and they're on you, man, are they on you? They just pour into the room, and at that point, you basically put away your gun with a silencer and take out an AK-47 or something. So
now, it seems like the consensus has been that GoldenEye Reloaded is actually the better game. I know that I'm looking at this right now from the Metascore for the 360
reviewers
version.
That actually say that they like this game better than the GoldenEye Reloaded.
Well, the difference right now is 24 points, percentage points out of 100. This one, 360 version of Reloaded, 72, 48 for Legends. Of course, it's subjective, but I'm going to point out a few more things. Now, before I move on to it, just watching some footage, I was watching the test chamber for the Game Informer, where they actually gave it a lower review than IGN did. Dan Reichert, who is one of my favorite video game writers, by the way. I love his stuff. But they were pointing out, or not even really pointing out, I was just watching it, that animations looked incredibly stiff for some of the stealth maneuvers.
I would have to agree. They are, I wouldn't say incredibly stiff, but some of them are stiff. But yet to compensate for it, some of the death animations when you shoot them, the hit detection when they're hit and fall to the ground, I think for the most part it looks good. So
hit detection did look good.
It's got some pluses and minuses with the animation for sure.
Hit detection did look good, but I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. Just from what I was watching, they used this ragdoll physics. Now, in Bond, it's kind of this spectacle. People flying through the air as opposed to someone, getting their arm chopped off. But when they were shooting people in the shins almost exclusively, and they were almost flipping over, I thought it looked very, very last generation.
It's slightly dated. If this game came out 4 years ago, it would be heralded as a 8.5 or a 9. I think that's part of it. You can't compare it to Duke Nukem Forever and obviously a huge wait that was 12 years, but I think that there was a little bit of hype about the game. People were looking forward to it because of the 50-year anniversary of Bond and the new Bond movie that is coming out shortly. So, and even some of the Bond fans seem to be disappointed with it. Other ones think it just are completely heralding the game, like myself. I think it's fantastic. What they captured, which they did beautifully in their From Russia with Love, which I had for the regular Xbox, was also available for the PlayStation 2, is they brought back the Sean Connery likeness and Robert Shaw. They had all the authentic 60s music from Russia with Love, the theme, the intro. And to me, that's what really made it a great Bond game. Well, that's what they've done with this game. And it actually in fact, I just read a review from the Gaming Nexus. Sean Colini said, Eurocom has upped the ante with 007's Legends, and he gave it an 8.5. I just found another brand new one from the UK, Game Zine Company in the UK. So the game is an inspiring approach to a movie-based video game. For us, it encompasses Bond perfectly, yet brings it into the next modern era to create what could be a dark horse in this year's Christmas season. So it has got some favorable reviews. In fact, right after the IGN review, I have a friend of mine has his own review show called Review Zone HD. His name is Zero, or at least I guess his pseudonym. And he actually before his review, made a counter review, which I think I copy and pasted it to you.
Yeah, I watched that.
And because he dismissed one by one a lot of those arguments that the other guy had on it from IGN. And then, of course, Russ today on Undertow, CGR Undertow, which he used to work with, just came out with a pretty good review, and he picked out some of the minuses. And the cons on the game as well. But he said, and just like me, that for true Bond fans, it really doesn't get any better than this. They captured the music. They got the likenesses of most of the villains, even the Bond women that were in the games. The music alone is just inspiring. Some of the set. So for the other guy to say they had stale set pieces, the guy is talking out of the side of his mouth. It's got beautiful set pieces. It blows away GoldenEye Reloaded. GoldenEye Reloaded was a lot more stale than this game. Honest to God, the set pieces are epic. And everyone keeps telling me, wait till you get to the final Moonraker. Moonraker is not a great film, but everyone that I've talked to about the game that's played all the way to the end just says the final, even the Moonraker level is truly epic. So
I'm going to have a drink of water just while you talk.
Set pieces.
Oh, go ahead. You're good. I'm getting a drink of water. Go ahead. So,
I mean, everything that I found in it, for the most part, was good. I'm not a giant fan of the, I guess, the QuickTime events. They do have boss fights with each villain. But ironically, when I actually started doing the QuickTime events, you use both thumbsticks, the right or left, and you have to respond very quickly or you get hit immediately. So you have to quickly hit up or down on either the left or right stick. You have to watch or hit the right or left trigger or both. And it's very tricky. If you don't do it just right, you get the crap beat out of you. So I find that when you have to quickly, you get all wound up and you're pushing up real hard. It's like he does an uppercut. You push down, he hits into the waist. It actually has a real visceral feel to it for a basic QuickTime event. So when I first watched it, I go, oh, brother, I go, here we go, the QuickTime events, and on the boss battles of all things. So it does appear to be lame, but it actually, in reality, functions pretty well. So for a game that was put together as quickly as this one was, probably to correlate with the opening of this new Skyfall movie, I think it really came out good. Now, I certainly wouldn't give it an 8.5. I would give it, realistically, an 8 for real Bond fans, and for the most part, probably a 7. I think would be a fair review. Now, I talked to another guy that gave it a 6. He likes it about as much as me, but he said because the split screen was in a 4.3 format, he had to give it a 6. So he had his own issues, and that's what I'm seeing is that people are going into it trying to hold it up with Nightfire, trying to hold it up with the original GoldenEye for the N64. Nothing is going to relive all of the glory days of the N64
well, you have
and
to
the
shoot
original
for
GoldenEye.
it, though, don't you think?
Again, you're dealing with expectations.
Yeah,
and I think the expectations are radically coloring people's perceptions on the game.
Don't you think you have to shoot for, a score like that, though? Or, the reception like that of those old games?
Well, I mean, for the most part, it's... I just don't understand how they can give GoldenEye Reloaded a high score of 8 and above. In this game, they have an introduction. They actually brought into it upgrades. Not quite an RPG, but it has a really good array of health upgrades. You got wonderful weapon upgrades, and you have gadget upgrades as well. So they've brought in so many new elements, and then on top of that, they brought in an enormous array of hidden collectibles, which is one of my favorite things in a game, is finding all of the hidden collectible items and then getting the achievements for that. So there's so many in this, I'm only getting like 30 to 40% of the collectibles. So I like it for that reason alone. This game has a lot more to offer and is probably closer to an old school Bond game than you're going to find even in Reloaded. As nice as Reloaded looks, this game is more polished than Reloaded. You can see they put more thought into the set pieces and a lot of the action scenes and what have you. So
okay,
it obviously is. It's going to be subjective. I'm a big Bond fan that was there since 1962, so I'm obviously going to have my own view of it. But even still, I don't give it a high rating. It's somewhat mundane looking compared to these outstanding shooters like Battlefield 3 and Crysis 3 and Max Payne 3 for that matter, but it's not a bad game. It's very colorful, a lot of great art direction that really brings the flavor of the original Bond classic scenes that were in each of those films.
Yeah, and I think the fact that those older games were so popular and were so well received is part of it. Now I'm gonna go in now, and basically I'm playing devil's advocate here. I don't want to.
Sure, no, I understand. Yeah. Go ahead.
But basically, Dan Rankert, his review, like I said, I love his reviews. I love his work, and he's freaking hilarious. If you watched any of this Game Informer videos, but basically, his first thing he wanted to point out was that the opening trailer for the game is kind of the same as the first scene in Skyfall, where you fall off the train. Now, what I kind of want to point out is, I think half marketing, half spoiler-free that they wanted to go with. That next month they're actually going to be releasing the end of the game, and this isn't like an optional thing. This is to finish the game.
And it's free, by the way. You won't have to pay for the DLC or
But I think people, especially with a game like this, it's so focused on single player, there will be a lot of people that aren't going to want to go back to a game that they put down, especially in this upcoming season of so many titles. But anyway, it's kind of beside the point. That's your choice. Mm-hmm. So,
I think the Bond fans will. I've already talked to 3 different people that say they can't wait for this Skyfall scene. So, they're actually ahead of me. They beat it about a day and a half in advance of me, finishing it. So
I'd advise you, if you're going to get the game, wait until that comes out so you can play it all in a row and not forget anything. But basically,
no, that makes sense. And who knows? Maybe the price will drop.
It probably will.
Possibly go down to $40 or something, which would be ideal. Then it's a good value. So I'm not heralding the game as oh my God, it's a 9. This is an outstanding game. It's mundane in certain aspects of the game. Now, my biggest cons with the game is the fact that there's really not a lot of instructions. They introduce all these new elements, new gadgets. You get like 3 seconds on the screen, hold left trigger while hitting A button, and it's gone. Mm-hmm. And then if you die and start over, it doesn't have any of those prompts up again.
Oh, that's weird.
Which drove me nuts. I actually had to text my friend Russell in Florida. Dude, what the hell do you do now? I'm stuck in this room. I don't know what to do. Dude, didn't you see the tutorial? I go, well, it was too fast. And, of course, there's no guide for it. There's not even a Prima e-guide for it, probably because they don't want to spoil what's going on with the Skyfall.
I'm sure they're going to release it after the fact. But basically, Reichert had 2 points that he wanted to make, or that I want to make from his points, rather. The one is the boss battles. Now, like you said, they don't play out as bad as they look, but he said each of the showcase Bond villains receives the same terrible quick-time event boss battle. You press an analog stick up or down to punch them until a life bar depletes, and occasionally tap a button quickly to disarm them. You're never in any danger in these. Most bosses can't even hit you once. It looked very slow to me, not very fun. And then the second thing, and this is kind of where he tears the game apart in one paragraph, and I quote, "It's a bad game when it's working, but there are plenty of moments that make you wonder how it even got cleared for release. Enemy AI frequently freaks out, causes soldiers to endlessly sprint against walls, often firing the guns at the ground. At one point, the frame rate dropped to...
I've never seen that at all through the whole game. That's almost like that frame rate issue that was brought up.
At one point, the frame rate dropped to unplayable levels, except it wasn't during a firefight. I was just walking around.
Of course, I install all my games. Maybe if you don't install it, it has some issues. But everyone I've talked to, including the ones at Rust that didn't install it, so didn't see one frame rate issue.
Okay. And like I said, this is a quote. This is from Dan Reichert. Even during the test chamber, they were wondering where the frame rate issues were. Apparently, he experienced them, and his they have a little entertainment bar on the side of the Game Informer website, for the reviews. Entertainment, and I know you'll disagree with this, but he said this game is sure to disappoint FPS fans and Bond aficionados alike.
I would say that the FPS fans know it's a solid, smooth, buttery smooth shooter. I mean, it really is a lot of fun because it does introduce, unlike, just a straightforward Call of Duty or Black Ops, it introduces some cool stealth things, the gadgets. It's a little complex until you get the swing of it. And just finally last night, after I'm on the final chapter, I finally figured out how to use the watch to find where the enemies were and to start using the laser beam. It's like, God, I could have used this several levels ago. So again, it's poorly explained how to implement all these tools. But once it works, it's a multi-layered, multitasking event. It's not like a straightforward Call of Duty. So I don't think it would disappoint FPS fans. Now, the real Bond fanatics obviously will take issue. And I kind of mentioned an illustration about it's like when your Splinter Cell Blacklist game comes out. Oh, that's not their story at all. They've departed so much from the story. That's not Michael Ironside's voice. So, I mean, you're always going to get that. So the diehard fans, and it's like Angry Joe on Duke Nukem Forever. He actually urinates on the game in his own toilet. It's humorous. I had to admit. I said, Joe, I love your reviews. I think you went too far. I left a comment.
I think he called that the worst game of the year.
He postures himself as a real Duke Nukem fan, but to me, it's a tribute to what the guys made. The game was in a complete mess for 12 years. Thank God, at least we got that. It ain't much, but it's something to relish in the flavor of Duke Nukem. I look at this game actually a lot better than Duke Nukem Forever. It's a solid shooter. I disagree with that. Now, there will be Bond fans probably split 50-50. And I'm one of them, frankly. I think that they should have, it would have cost them billions of dollars, but get the likeness and voice of Roger Moore, get the likeness and voice of George Larrabee, Sean Connery, and all of the villains. It would have cost a fortune, probably another 2 years in production. So it's unrealistic, but that was my beef with it. I don't like seeing a smartphone in a 1964 movie, you know?
At the same time, though, if they're going to stick with just Daniel Craig and have this whole persona that he's James Bond, because, you know, they move on. Daniel Craig is James Bond now. I actually didn't... That was one thing I actually kind of liked, that they tried to put him into these and try to modernize the whole thing.
No, and I see that, and I kind of accept it for what it is, and I completely agree with you. I think it actually works. It brings people up to speed. A lot of people have never seen the earlier Sean Connery movies or the Roger Moore ones. Yeah. One reviewer goes, this Moonraker thing, they were talking about it with he had a co-host, and he goes, who was the Bond in the Moonraker? Oh, I don't know. I mean, these people have never even seen the movies, and they're sitting there reviewing and shredding the game. So I think it's the game didn't get a lot of publicity. In fact, if you look on the Xbox Marketplace, there's not even a listing for it. Mm-hmm. It's very strange. So there's no strategy guide for it. It has very poor instructions. So the game needed a little bit more time. I think visually it looks polished for what it is. It looks literally better than GoldenEye Reloaded, if you can believe that. So
now the next review that I'm going to point out, and I did this on purpose. I know you love Giant Bomb.
Mm-hmm. No, I do, actually.
They gave it a 2 out of 5. That's a 40 on the Metacritic, so that's the same as Game
Informer. I saw them playing the game for 40 minutes. I know it was painful.
So I'm going to...
Right off the bat, within 5 minutes, we're already picking it apart.
I'm going to point out, basically, this is one more thing, and this is something I had issue with, and I'll mention the Splinter Cell thing after this. All these gameplay issues would be a bit less aggregate. I hate saying that word. I'm just going to skip over it. If the missions you were presented with were, well, better presented. Daniel Craig isn't around. You've got a goofy-sounding, sound-alike mumbling his way through conversations with other poorly voiced characters. The actual context for each story is all but lost in translation as well. You're just dropped into the mission, giving a quick briefing, and off you go. Over the course of each mission, how much of the actual plot you will get varies widely. Goldfinger, for instance, does an okay job of setting up the Taylor villain's plan, but on Her Majesty's Secret Service does a terrible job of explaining why you're there.
It just dumps you right into it. No, I agree. Now, again, if you're an old school Bond fan like me and you've seen the films a dozen times each, you know, like they show this Tracy who's in Her Majesty's Secret Service. That's the only woman that Bond actually marries, and all of a sudden they introduce her father. Well, if you've seen the film, you know his voice, you know what he looks like. So I didn't think twice about it, but then I saw one reviewer goes, and who the hell is this guy? And they showed the guy and the daughter, and it's like, again, if you've never watched the movies or played a lot of Bond games, it's not going to make a lot of sense. So I would have to agree with Jeff and them on that point, although for me it wasn't an issue because I knew what they were trying to do. Yeah. I knew exactly what the story was, and I saw the free license that they were taking with each of the segments in the story.
Yeah. So as far as, you mentioned Ironside and whether that's going to be picked apart, I think part of the difference is that Sam Fisher, he's been played by Ironside for 10 years or so, but while with this game, they're trying to give this persona of Daniel Craig as James Bond, and they didn't get his voice. And from what I heard...
It wasn't Daniel Craig's voice, by the way.
No, it was not. And from what I heard, it sounded awful. It wasn't like they got a good replacement.
It's not bad. I don't think it's awful. It actually, in fact, until I saw a review that said it wasn't him, I went back and had to listen to one of the I go, God, I guess it isn't him. It fooled me for the first chapter anyway.
Okay. I listened to it. I hated it. I was listening to his voice. It sounded very bland, very uncharismatic. But that's just my opinion. As far as the Splinter Cell thing goes, I think the main difference is Eric Johnson, the replacement they got for Ironside. Mm-hmm. He isn't trying to copy Ironside. He's going with a slightly different style, and he's a very, very good actor.
Oh, he is. No, I like his voice. I watched the extended trailer, and it sounds and looks great. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
And it's going to take some getting used to for people, just like I'm sure it did when, Sean Connery, the first Bond, was out as Bond, and I'm sure Eric Johnson probably won't be the last Sam Fisher.
But what my point is, let's say a reviewer that loves the series as much as you, kind of like Angry Joe loves Duke Nukem like I love him, but then just rips at a new one because his story deviates far from anything, kind of like Double Agent, how also now he's playing both sides of the fence. Some people liked it, some people didn't. that was kind of odd, a little odd, I guess, for me as well. But I'm saying if someone took something as minute as his voice, or the Michael Ironside wasn't doing it, so he had a personal vendetta for the game just based on that. And then obviously he filters everything the way he looks at the game, because you can sit on the fence on everything. You can either look at the glass as half empty or half full.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think every game is either a 2 or a 10, but I think that there's somewhere in between. And it's nice that I could have the banter with a couple reviewers via Facebook and on YouTube, and at least have a intellectual debate on it. And they conceded to some of my points, and I conceded to a few of theirs. But I think the game is great. I think it's a solid 8 for Bond fans, and a 7. It's average. I think that even to give it a 6.5 would be really a shame. It's just too low. It really is a good game. So it works good. If it was broke or had bugs or glitches, or if I saw enemies clipping into walls, I mean, I've seen more clipping and problems in some of the Black Ops game that I have in this one. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it plays very smooth. I like the gameplay, very good level design, very colorful. I will agree with you on the boss battles. I don't like quick time events, even though these ones were different and a little bit more unique. You feel like you're uppercutting or hitting down, and you do it very quickly, and you're forced to. So I found myself getting into it more than I usually do with just hitting the A, B, or X buttons. But again, yeah, I had some similar grievances with the game. Certainly would have preferred the other actors, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. I'm just thankful that they made it. It's kind of like an extension of Goldeneye, but with a lot more stuff dumped into it. So, and
I can tell you like it. The consensus seems to be in the opposite direction. By the way, if I know you really disliked the IGN review because you thought he was filtering all of his stuff, like you said, through this kind of shit colored glasses, because he didn't like the some of the decisions.
You can tell by his tone that he didn't like it. He's down on what he's not up on. He certainly is not up on this Bond.
Yeah, and it could. I mean, I think you have to give some reviewers a chance, an opinion. I know you didn't have the frame.
I understand, but when it's a mainstream reviewer and it's one of the first ones that comes out, it's not a bad game. Now, the Amy game is perhaps a bad game. Like masturbating with a cheese grater. Interesting, but pretty painful. I mean, it's just not a good game. I'm sorry, that was a pretty crude joke, but I mean, the Amy is really the worst game that I've seen in years. I seldom play a bad game. No, I do play a lot of fair games. Ryan did a review, or CGR Undertow, of Soldier of Fortune Payback. Now, that game would be like a 5.5 or a 6. It's a guilty pleasure. I like the gore and the heads getting severed off and all that. But to basically call that, even that game, a bad game, it's kind of on the fence. It's a fair game. But to label this game as bad would be, like I said, labeling Modern Warfare 2 as bad when you've rated Call of Duty 4 a fantastic, great, awesome achievement. It just doesn't make sense. And IGN themselves rated the GoldenEye Reloaded in 8.5. So This game is virtually the same engine. It looks the same, only it's more polished with a lot more augmented elements and stealth and gadgets, and even the guns sound and feel better. It really has a lot more impact. I just am shocked by it. To me, it is not a bad game. It's irresponsible, in my opinion. Even though I agree with you, he should be entitled to his opinion. But he's a mainstream reviewer. He's not some dude on YouTube that just has 100 viewers or whatever. This is someone that's he's damaging a game that is not. I don't think it's a bad game. If he said it was average, I'd have to agree with him. It's a pretty average game. Now, there's above average and below average, but it's not a bad game. I don't buy that. I think it was an irresponsible review. I've seen a couple reviews like this that were just really harsh. Now, we were talking about Resident Evil 6. You can clearly watch, like I did on Giant Bomb for over 40 minutes. You can watch the footage. You can see it's clunky. You can see the horrendous camera. You can see the bizarre, a hell of a lot more of the QuickTime events. And I think that those, the consensus on that, you can see it. The person can see it. Now, other than you seeing the QuickTime events and the boss battles, this game is not a bad game. It functions well. The fun factor is good for Bond fans, and I think the mechanics of it are very smooth. I just don't see why he can label it as a bad game, because it doesn't live up to the Bond game that he thinks it should be.
Okay.
So that was my opinion. Even though he does have his opinion as a reviewer, I think he has a responsibility for people that might be wanting to buy the game. And I think it's irresponsible to leave. You better be real sure before you put a bad stamp on anything, movie or a game.
I think at the same time, his responsibility was and I'm cutting this off pretty quickly because I don't want to.
Oh, I know.
I don't want to throw the gloves off.
Flog a dead horse into the ground here.
Because but I think he has a responsibility, if he really disliked it as much as he would, to tell people, maybe this isn't worth your time. And at the same time, damaging a game as it might be. And I know you're not going to agree with me on this. I don't intend to make you, but when the consensus is, and this is after 13 reviews from a variety of sources, 48 out of 100, to me that tells you something. Now, I understand you like it. I'm glad you like it, but I don't think we're going to agree on this. So we're going to move on now to our third segment of the week. And this is what we're currently playing and what we're looking forward to. Now, I'm going to let you start off with this. I think I know the answer already, but what are you playing? What are you looking forward to?
Well, right now I'm finishing, ironically, to flog the horse one more time. I'm finishing the end of the Legends, 007 Legends. And then I'm quickly moving. I've been also playing a little bit of Doom 3 BFG, which I got the same day. Now, I haven't even discussed that game, but it is a wonderful HD remake. They use the Rage game engine, which doubles as far as the frame rate. Very smooth. It looks very dated, like the original Doom 3
which is common with HD remakes, yeah.
But the textures do look good, and it's great. I've only played the first level, but just to see it, you get Doom 1 and 2, which look good for, an older arcade game, which you could also get on Xbox Live Arcade. But I've been playing those, and I got the Killzone trilogy actually today, which I'm looking forward to playing the Killzone one. I never had a chance to play that. So, of course, we got the Medal of Honor Warfighter coming Tuesday. Forza Horizon has got glowing 9.5 reviews, 9s. Very high reviews for the people that were fortunate enough to get an advanced copy of it, including Mark Bussler, one of our our favorite reviewers, gave it a wonderful review in actually 2 parts.
So basically this is I mentioned Scribblenauts earlier. I finished Dishonored a while ago, so the game I've been playing has been Scribblenauts Remix on the iPhone. I have a thing for iPhone games. Basically, like I said, it takes some stuff from the earlier Scribblenauts games and combines it with new levels. The ideas, as far as Scribblenauts go, are very well executed, but because you're playing it on a touchscreen, the controls are terrible. You touch your finger to move objects around, but then you can sometimes accidentally move your character or vice versa. So that game, I've been playing it, I've been enjoying it, I've been kind of fighting through it, but it has been fun. And the game I'm most looking forward to is Medal of Honor Warfighter. I want to see how it's doing, because it's gotten very polarized reception for the beta. Now, if you recall, Battlefield 3 actually got similar reception.
Yes, it did.
When the beta came out, because it was a very small download. I believe this Medal of Honor download was only like 1.6 gigs, which isn't that much. The single player looks very exciting, but at the same time, I know you're not too much into multiplayer, but I like multiplayer, and this game has very good ideas. I think it would be a shame if they're not executed as well as they could have been.
I think it looks very handsome. It's a nice-looking game. From what I've seen, I actually watched a couple, Phil on DSP's Gaming did a wonderful playthrough of the beta, and he had some frustrations with it, but he was enjoying it. It seemed like he was enjoying it, and it looked really good, I thought, almost like Battlefield 3.
It's kind of in between Battlefield and Call of Duty, I think is what they're going for. I thought some of the problems I had with Battlefield 3's Frostbite engine, which they're using, are still present. I thought textures on the ground looked really bad. My guess is those will be improved, presumably with an HD texture pack like Battlefield 3 had.
Yeah,
and
which I downloaded on mine, by the way. I thought it made a big difference.
Oh, it did.
It looked a lot better.
It did. And the other problem was crawling, like in Battlefield 3, I thought looked really bad. Hands kind of almost like they were swimming over the ground. But with that being said, whenever I see a single-player version of it, or a little trailer, gameplay trailer, or I see some captured footage by the developers where presumably they're using that engine, or excuse me, that update, that texture pack, the game looked very good. So My guess is early on, low to mid 80s is what I assume it's going to be getting for most people. I'm very thankful, of course, that you actually bought it for me. I'm a college student, by the way. If anyone's watching this, if you want to send me free stuff, that'd be awesome.
Well, it was kind of a gift because I was excited that you went to college. I felt bad that you were leaving as far as the Undertow reviews, or at least for now. So it was my way of sharing. So you seemed a little bit excited about it. And I buy a lot of games for friends because I like to see everyone experience the games that I like anyway. So I thought it would be at least the least I could do for you to help you out a little bit. So
yeah, and I'm very thankful. By the way, I said I'd send you something again. At some point during this video, I said the name of the game I'm going to be getting you in return. So you can look forward to watching that.
Before too.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Said it again. You'll figure it out eventually. So that's it for this week, guys. Make sure you subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at GamingAngelGabe. That's Gabe, because Twitter doesn't let you type out Gabriel all the way. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, tell your friends, and keep watching. I'm Gabe Gurwin, and this is What We Saw, and I'm with Dean Thompson.
Enjoy your games, folks.